You are very welcome indeed to this webinar from Chartered Accountants Ireland on why nature matters for accountants. My name is Susan Rosney. I'm Sustainability Advocacy Manager with the Institute, and I'm delighted to be joined by three wonderful speakers today. We have Dee Moran, who is our Head of Professional Accounting with the Institute and a Chartered Accountant herself. We'll then be joined by Dr. Catherine Farrell, who is an ecologist and is also, among other things, a lecturer with Trinity Business School. And finally, we will be joined by Rosie Dunscombe, also a chartered accountant with the Institute of Chartered Accountants England and Wales, and the author of the publication Why Nature Matters for Accountants. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Dee and enjoy the presentations.
That is brilliant, Susan, and thank you so much. Welcome, everybody. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of background on the Global Accounting Alliance and just to look at some of the resources that we in Chartered Accountants Ireland have. So the Global Accounting Alliance was formed back in 2005, and it really serves as a forum for 10 of the world's leading professional accountancy bodies to look at areas, and it represents 1.4 million accountants worldwide, so a very far reach. And its purpose is really to serve the public interest by leading the advancement of high quality accounting profession by sharing information and collaborating amongst all of the GAA members. I know everyone in Ireland here will not think of the GAA as the Global Accounting Alliance, so apologies for the confusion on that. And also, but it's also to advocate on international issues which are important to the profession. So they do this by a number of working groups to progress various projects, and I myself sit on the GAA Sustainability Working Group, and we've been really busy looking at topics such as sustainability assurance and where sustainability reporting is going in these uncertain times. We were also thrilled to help in some small way on the guide on why nature matters to accountants, and I think this is a really fantastic resource for all accountants, actually, and we will hear more about this. The primary authors of this, while the GAA Sustainability Group did help, but it was Toby Roxburgh from ICAEW, and also Rosie, founder of Blue Crane Consulting, and we're thrilled to have Rosie here with us to tell us more about it, but a little bit more on that later. We're also very focused here in Chartered Accountants Ireland on nature. And we have a number of publications to assist members, such as the biodiversity one, which is Accounting for Nature, and Climate Essentials for Accountants. So I'll post a link to the chat here if you want to have a look at that. And there's also some great general sustainability resources there. But firstly, let us look at nature in general and the Irish landscape. And I'm delighted to be joined by Dr. Catherine Farrell, who Susan has already introduced. And Catherine is going to bring us through what is nature, why does it matter, how we impact on nature, how we depend on nature, and how we can work with it. So thank you so much, Catherine. I'm going to hand over to you.
That's great, thanks. And I always find it really interesting to get a view of who's in the room and what their background and their understanding is of nature. And I know that there's no David Attenboroughs, but there can certainly be some great fans of nature. And as I go through my slides, I'll highlight some ways that we can all have a look around nature in Ireland this summer. So thanks so much. My name's Catherine Farrell. I am an assistant professor of business and nature working in Trinity Business School. Normally, you will find me, I'm sorry, the results just popped up there and see no David Attenboroughs, but yeah, some who know a bit about nature. Great. Okay. So from my perspective, you would normally find me on a hillside, usually in wellies, and talking to people about bogs and the wonders, which we have some fantastic peatlands in Ireland. But I'm also involved in working through the education system, delivering undergraduate programs, and also working with Business for Biodiversity Ireland to help businesses develop nature strategies. And, part of that process is helping them to understand these elements here in terms of what is nature, why does it matter for business, and introducing some of the language that business people and accountants will be more familiar with. So crossing the divide from pure ecological speak to words like impacts, dependencies, risks, and opportunities. And then I'm going to sort of prime the scene for Rosie to highlight how we can integrate nature into decision making. So we're going to begin to focus on the greatest accounting boundary that one might consider, which is the Earth. And so just to introduce some terms here in relation to natural systems, complex systems, and systems thinking. So really, when we speak about the Earth, I always like to bring it back to the fact that this is, a natural system. Some of you might have been able to watch the wonderful ocean documentary presented by David Attenborough recently. We have some land covered by vegetation, but we're actually quite dominated by an ocean world. And importantly, we rely on the Earth's biosphere and the natural resources that it provides for our survival. So we're really just getting down to brass tacks here. In terms of what is the biosphere is a complex of natural systems, and it's that space where life exists. So, really it's the collection of the living components and how they interact with the non-living components. And that gives us this wonderful resource that heretofore we may have taken for granted, but now we're starting to recognize that it has limits and boundaries. And indeed, contrary to some believers, there is no planet B, and we really have to look after this one because I really don't want to move to Mars. Thank you. So I mentioned some of those systems, and our friends in the Stockholm Resilience Centre have done some great work, and some of you might be familiar with some of their team. So really what they set about doing was mapping out the systems and boundaries that we have and where humanity lives in a safe and safe operating space. So when we look at these images, we can see that over time between 2009 up until recently, we started to move from this green space out into the orange and into slightly more dangerous looking territory. So this is across boundaries which include our biospheres. That's the space within which we live. And, that's also right beside here climate change. So climate change and biodiversity loss are interlinked. They're two sides of the one coin, because the natural systems provide all the support mechanisms like clean air, water, etc., for us to function. So we have a challenge, and the global challenges are indeed felt locally. To bring it back to biodiversity and ecosystems, so as an ecologist, I'm really interested in this aspect. Here we have a picture of the tropical rainforest, and you can see that even by just putting a roll through, we are dissecting a heretofore connected landscape. And really, I think people are becoming more comfortable recognizing that nature is indeed the silent stakeholder. We often don't recognize it on our balance sheet. And indeed, lots of the nature that we rely on is actually invisible. So it might be within our soils, or if you wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and you start to see mammals like foxes running across the road, you'll see we don't see a lot of nature beyond our gardens. And in recognition of the fact that, we have impacted on our nature, there is a new initiative called the Nature Positive Initiative, largely driven by the global targets for nature. And that's where a number of businesses have actually come together to develop this Nature Positive Initiative to show that we need to start reversing that curve, which is indeed ongoing negative. We want to get back up and start building back our biodiversity stocks. So we can thrive and prosper in this world. Just a quick introduction. Many of you may be based in Ireland. Chartered Accountants Ireland has a strong reach, I know, but we have some wonderful ecosystems in Ireland, ranging from peatlands, woodlands, wetlands, coastal systems, and wonderful species-rich grasslands. If you get out to the Aran Islands this summer, down to the Burren. So we have wonderful natural capital here. Sadly, we're starting to convert a lot of this. Not that we're starting, we've already converted a lot of this to more monoculture sward. So that green shade of Ireland is becoming sort of a one shade of green, I'm afraid. So, you know, myself and my colleagues are working to help promote nature positive actions at farm level as well. And just some friendly images of some of the species that you might see during this summer. Wonderful basking sharks off the west coast of Ireland, badgers, squirrels, and sadly a number of these species are rare or threatened. So the onus is on us to, you know, protect them and look after them, and you recognize that they have, you know, obviously a right to exist, but we also rely on a number of these species for our own livelihoods. So as a scientist and as somebody who's worked in the business community, I've often struggled to convey the value of nature and why we depend on it. And over the last number of decades, we've begun to frame nature's stocks in that framing of natural capital. So being the ultimate capital or stock that we rely on for flows that deliver benefits. So this is really a metaphor, which, you know, not all ecologists are comfortable with, I have to say, but it's important in terms of visualizing, you know, in a language that we can all adhere to, that these stocks of grasslands, of woodlands, of, you know, soil provide flows of benefits for us. And the benefits indeed are food, healthy climate, and so on and so forth. So it's back to that, you know, without healthy ecosystems, we won't have that continued delivery of services and flows. But let's take it another level in terms of looking at how this relates to the other capitals that we have that we might be reporting on as accountants. So again, in this capitals diagram here, we see natural capital underpinning, you know, social and intellectual capital, within which our manufactured and our financial capital sit. If we look to our sustainable development goals, we see the biosphere underpins society and economy. You know, so the economy is very much removed from the biosphere, but it is a social construct. On the right, I've shown the terms that we use to describe the biosphere, just to keep those in mind through our discussion. So society and economy relying on this wonderful biosphere. And then if we layer up on top of that again, we can see that the produced capital and human capital really is relying on the flows of resources and services from natural capital. And, you know, we do deliver back to nature, but not always the right things. Okay, so we deliver some pollution, some waste, and I know we're starting to begin to account for those. So we do have impacts on nature, but we also have dependencies on nature. So we need to begin to track those. And the first step is often to understand our relationship with nature. Now, we have impacts, we have dependencies, but also because of those, we might have elements of risk relating to those dependencies. And I also like to talk about opportunities. So there's opportunities for how we change our business models, for how we can sort of move away and become and de-risk parts of our business that might be over-reliant on elements of nature. So really, we can see our language, the language that we use, which in terms of, you know, we move from A to B, nature, resources, they're a given. We have to go back to that systems thinking that I outlined at the beginning, recognizing that we rely on nature. So how is our nature? So it's not good, really. And so this is the doom and gloom element, which, you know, we have to recognize that, you know, we've lost a lot of our resources in terms of our natural ecosystems and species. We have elevated greenhouse gas emissions, and yet we have a growing population. Now, we want to look after the people on this planet, and we want to look after the nature so that the people on the planet can thrive. And so recognizing that, as a wonderful report recently by Partha Dasgupta, which outlined our reliance and our relationship with natural capital and how we could begin to reverse some of our impacts. But we really need to start becoming nature positive. So there's lots of different ways that we have to work together. And when I say have to work together, I mean, we can work together. And I'm delighted to be here amongst, these colleagues in accountancy and, really transversing these formerly siloed approaches to nature and to working together. And in the business school, in Trinity Business School, we have several programs in terms of building capacity, but also research in terms of mapping out the sorts of policies that we have, who are the people who are acting in this space, such as Business for Biodiversity Ireland, Chartered Accountants, business in the community. What kinds of research do we need to progress action? And how do we measure and report? So this is really bringing in the things like CSRD, TNFD. How do we measure? But the first step is to understand our relationship, and then how we can measure and hopefully account to the wonderful GAA approach that Rosie is going to introduce to us. An important piece is capacity building, and that's really where my focus is at this time. But one thing I do want to highlight, and that is accounting. And so I've worked in many spaces. I've worked with people driving diggers to do restoration work, and I've worked trying to leverage funding from the chief financial officers and all that sorts. And now I'm working with accountants, and specifically also statisticians. So the UN have developed this wonderful system of environmental and economic accounting, and specifically an ecosystem accounting module, which I'm sure is aligned with the GAA approach in ways. And I've also worked on a project to deliver this at catchment scale in Ireland called InCase. And I've inserted a YouTube link here, which tells you why accountants matter for nature. And I really want you to click on this link. So what we might do is we might share it in the chat when I stop talking and after we watch Rosie's wonderful presentation. So with that in mind, I've set the stage for Rosie to interact with us, and I'm really looking forward to your presentation, and I will be available for questioning, obviously, in the Q&A. So thanks so much.
That is fantastic, Catherine. Thank you so much. And there really is an awful lot there. And I know I've seen this a lot, and it's true. Like there is no planet B. We have our planet. We have to look after it. And it was just great to see, all that stuff on the wonderful natural capital that we have in Ireland. So returning to the GAA Nature Guide, and to hear more about it, Rosie is going to give us an introduction to the guide and how to integrate nature into your work and the role of accounting profession in this. And just to look, what I really love about this guide is it's not something that you read from start to finish. You can take out the piece that's kind of important to you, and it does go through the various roles. So over to you, Rosie, please. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Dee, and thank you, Catherine, for that wonderful presentation to get us started. So I'll share my screen.
And while you're doing that, Rosie, we might just share the next poll as well on this is more about what role that people are filling. Great, and share the results. So you should see that appearing on the screen now.
Lovely. So it's like, so we will look at the senior manager piece of the guidance then.
Okay.
I'll try and reference some other areas where I can, but senior manager,
Okay.
just hit the report preparer there.
Indeed. I'm going to stop sharing this poll now and leave the floor with you.
Fabulous. Thank you. So yes, as Susan and Dee have said, we've got just a few minutes to give you a bit of a feel for this guidance that I co-wrote with Toby Roxburgh and with support from the working group, which Dee was part of. So thank you. Those are my co-authors. So this guidance was leveraging off of the nature positive commitment that the Global Accounting Alliance made. So Catherine was talking about that. And we were saying that actually, you know, what does that mean in practice for accountants? What should we be doing to contribute to this nature positive journey? And so this guidance was aiming to fulfill that. And it's split in, it's a guide of two halves, really. So we have the first half, which is this foundational knowledge of what does nature mean? Why does it matter to accountants? And all of the good stuff that Catherine was talking about. Let's talk about risk and opportunity, impacts and dependencies. And some of the more accounting type content I've sort of included screenshots of here of seeing how these dependencies and impacts on nature might trickle down into your risk management and have financial impacts. And also a look here at how it could interact with some accounting standards. Now, it's sort of a personal thing of me. I hate when a sort of 200-page guidance document lumps on my desk and I feel I have to read it from page 1 to page 200. So it really is designed for you to dip in and out of. And so that's why at the end we have this role-specific guidance, which looks across these 5 roles we just polled you on. And so you can just open the one that's relevant for you. It acknowledges that not everyone is going to neatly fit into one role, though. So, you know, you can obviously use it as it suits you best to see which actions it's recommending and what resources it's pointing to. So that's a quick overlook at the guidance. But then I thought I'd quickly, latching onto what Catherine was saying, which I love that she said, you know, this nature loss sits right next to the issue of climate change. And looking at these two issues kind of side by side and that they're interrelated, the guidance sort of leverages off, you know, you might have already done some reporting on climate change. You might have thought about how it's impacting your business. And nature kind of builds alongside that. We think of a lot of the same things. It is more complex than climate. It's context specific, so it is more tricky in many ways to look at. But essentially, what this diagram is trying to say is with nature loss, it presents risk and opportunity to companies. And we sort of categorize those as physical risks and transition risks. So for physical risks, I've included some examples here, such as you may have nature loss creating increased water stress. It's deforestation with that scary image that Catherine shared. Loss of pollinators is one many people are familiar with. Soil erosion. These are just a few of the physical impacts, physical risks that may be presented to your business. We also have what we call transition risks, and this is where we're transitioning towards a world that is more conscious of nature risks. We may start to see things such as permit refusals if the work you're trying to do is having a negative impact on nature. There are increasing lawsuits around nature, and we're seeing a deterioration in credit ratings and market valuations. And this is all symptomatic of a world where the policy and legal framework is moving more towards protecting nature. We're seeing technological advantages of people where they may be improving their technology to maybe create a product that has less of a negative nature impact. Those kind of things need to be considered. And I think as we have lost a lot of our nature, we're seeing those risks and also the opportunities that sit alongside them increase. And so what could that mean for your business? Well, in terms of financial risk, you know, a very simple example is we look at, for example, almond farmers in California. Due to pollinator decline, they are having to pay to ship in beehives to pollinate the almond trees. Now, they have a choice there. They can either pay to ship in honeybees, which is an increased cost for them, an increased cost of sale, or they could not do that and accept decreased revenues from lower productivity of their stock. So we're seeing it starting to impact ways like that. And it can also affect your balance sheet where you may have numbers in there that include forward-looking, so cash generating units or looking at assets that are valued by future cash flows. Those may need to be looked at, and we are increasingly seeing these impacts start to filter through, and that can all have financial impacts in terms of credit risk, operational risk, etc. So just wanted to, this little section was for connecting with those issues Catherine was saying and seeing how they might present. in a financial sense and in an accounting sense. I would spend a lot longer on this if I could, but just a taste of the day. And this is in that Global Accounting Alliance guide, it's referenced there. So to get your heads more around, I know that nature loss is an issue, but I don't see how it's impacting business. There are a lot of case studies in there as well. And so then to talk about the role of the accounting profession in this. So here we've got the 5 roles, but just to say that high level, accountants play a really critical role in integrating nature into decision making. I think, we have a lot of the expertise in data analysis, financial planning, and risk management. And speaking personally, I worked as an accountant in the finance team for broadly 10 years. And then I retrained as an environmental economist. And I remember thinking, how are my skills going to translate across? And they really do. All that training that we have and the experience we have is much needed in this nature space. And I think we have a traditional and slightly derogatory view of accountants as bean counters. And that's really not what we are. We're actually storytellers. We're trying to tell the story behind the data. What is this telling us? What action do we need to take as a result of this? Our roles are really about providing useful information for our stakeholders. And when it comes to nature, we've heard that risks are growing. We've heard that this increasingly needs to be integrated, therefore, into our roles if we're going to continue to, for example, as a board member, act in the company's best interest, or if we're going to, as senior managers, align our strategy with sustainability and take into account those increasing risk and opportunities. As analysts, we need to assess material risk and opportunities from our interactions with nature and integrate those into financial planning. And again, for report preparers, including any material nature-related information for our investors, and auditors, the same, we're going to be reviewing that information to check that it is in fact useful and free from material misstatement. So with these increasing risks and opportunities associated with nature, it's creeping into all of these roles. And so that second half of the guidance takes each of these roles in turn and looks at how, what are the key roles? How can we be integrating nature? And under each of these roles, it structures the text really around 5 actions to take to start to integrate nature into your roles. And I always think we want to kind of start small with this. And if nothing else, look at action number 1, the first action that's listed in this guidance, and how could you start to take action on that first action? So looking at the senior manager roles, I'm just going to flick through here. So this is the board member piece, which I produced some slides for in case we had a lot of board members on the call. Here's the guidance for senior managers. I think we had 11 people tick that box. So this is what you will see in the guide. It's literally a screenshot. So a little overview of the role in this table here. So saying that senior managers play essential roles in shaping an organization's strategic plans, financial decisions, etc. So hopefully some of you on the call can recognize yourself there and recognize some of those typical responsibilities, which may be relating to corporate governance, strategic reporting, performance monitoring and target setting, etc. And what we've done is that the green on the left is that traditional accountant's role, and the blue on the right is ways that nature relates to those specific responsibilities. So we can start to see that actually staying current on evolving nature-related requirements and best practice is really important if you're going to support like the business case for nature to board members and in that undertake proper corporate governance. Also in your strategic planning, your performance monitoring, what are impacts on nature? What is the strategy for your business? How does nature feed into that? And how are you communicating that, aligning any goals? So all of that feeds into then these 5 actions. And so I'll do a quick overview of these before I hand back. So for senior managers, we had number 1 action is to familiarize yourself with the relevant nature-related materiality assessment findings. Now, your organization may or may not have undertaken a nature-related materiality assessment. I'm sure most of you, that hasn't happened. And if it hasn't happened, if it has, then great, you can pick up those results and familiarize yourself with that. If it hasn't, then I'd really point you towards the TNFD LEAP guidance. And I don't think we've mentioned, well, I think actually Catherine did mention it briefly on her slide of resources, but that's the Task Force for Nature-Related Financial Disclosures. And it's a really key guidance in this nature area. And it's not written for accountants. It's written for people undertaking nature assessments. So we often say that for accountants, we're not expecting everyone on this call to suddenly go out and become an expert in nature. But I think having a high level understanding of what that report, it's a reporting framework and an assessment process. What it's saying means that you can work with the relevant experts to understand your business's relationship with nature. So the LEAP guidance is locate, evaluate, assess, prioritize. It's essentially taking you through a step-by-step process to follow for initial scoping and screening steps to identify which nature-related issues may be material. So that's the first thing, is really understand your business's relationship with nature. To do that by TNFD LEAP, having a quick look at what that is, you could literally do on the back of an envelope because you know your business better than everyone. You don't have to be an expert, but I think having a bit of knowledge to be competent to speak to other experts. Action number 2 is to identify applicable nature-related legal requirements and what best practice looks like. So for this, we're saying, the board is ultimately accountable for ensuring compliance, but as a senior manager, you're responsible for informing the board and ensuring good governance is adhered to. So we're seeing increasing nature-related legal requirements coming in because of this increasing risk and opportunity. So it's important that the business is adhering to that, and you have a key role to play in that. And in this guidance, there is sort of a big table of all the disclosure frameworks and standards. It's referenced there on the right, page 34. So you have the IFRS Sustainability Disclosure Standards, the ESRS, GRI, TNFD, all the nice acronyms, but there's a whole reference table there. Action 3 is to work with stakeholders to establish and implement your organization's nature strategy. So you can see these actions are building up. So once you've done those first 2, you can start looking at that. Action 4 is to then incorporate nature into performance monitoring and target setting. So once you've got that strategy sorted, as I was saying, those skills with sort of data management and with working towards targets and providing, I think, robust and coherent, comparable information is really key. Those skill sets are so useful in this area. And finally, we had engage with stakeholders on nature. You have a pivotal role in stakeholder engagement, and some of you may have more of that type of role, and some of you may less. So taking these actions that are relevant for your role. And so those are the 5 key actions for senior managers. And a lot of those actions will translate. I know we had a lot of report preparers on the call as well. For report preparers, we're also saying, trying to understand that TNFD framework, to understand your organization's relationship with nature, understand what frameworks are out there. As I was saying in this slide here, they identify the applicable standards. We've got all those standards on the right there. That is also referenced for report preparers. And at the end of each section, we have a page of useful resources, and it's different for each role. But for senior managers, we've set these out here, and this is all in the reports you can have a look at. And then I can sneakily flick through quite quickly. We could go and look for these are the ones for report preparers, I think. So yeah, we've got some TNFD guidance here, the Encore tool, so do pick up this guide, and I wish you could sort of physically pick it up, but always flick around a bit, go to the pages they reference you to. You don't have to read it from end to end. It's a resource to be picked up and flicked through, focusing on the pages that are most relevant for your role. But I hope that by setting it out in the roles like that, having these links to other resources makes it more user-friendly. So on that note, I will pass back to Susan and Dee.
Thank you so much, Rosie. Thank you. And I just noticed you put in a reference there to the LEAP TNFD guidance. I threw something into the chat there, and I just hope I've got the right one. It's the additional guidance on assessment of nature-related issues, and it's the LEAP approach. And I'd direct everyone to the chat as well, because Dee has also put in a link there to the Global Accounting Alliance publication that you were referencing, obviously that you were going through in detail there, rather. And Catherine has put in some links to the in-case videos for how accountants play an important role in accounting for nature, and also the in-case project generally. So I have a couple of questions in. And there's one that I think actually, Dee, I was going to hand over to you first, because there's a question that was specifically for Catherine. And then I've got another question which is coming from the audience.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Susan. Yeah, Catherine, you mentioned in your presentation about a project you were doing on business and nature in Trinity, and I think it was something that you had done with the final year students for their capstone last year. So I just wondered if you just wanted to give us just a little bit more on it, and perhaps if you're looking at doing the same next year, if anybody on the call might be able to help you.
Yeah, so this year I delivered a new module called the Business of Nature Positive, and that was really exciting and illuminating for the business students, the undergraduates there. We just, I presented, what I've just done in terms of, we need to work with nature, and outlined the CSRD and TNFD frameworks that Rosie alluded to. And importantly then, the business students worked with a business to map out their value chain, their impacts and dependencies, risks and opportunities, and went a bit deeper than that to look at, well, what kinds of information are you gathering that you can actually use, and are you ready to report? So we framed it in a maturity assessment for businesses in terms of their ability to report based on their current understanding. So we worked with 15 different businesses, and we had a fantastic experience. It went from, a single operator, an artist based in County Westmeath, to somebody, a massive aviation company, and actually a big mining company as well. So it was illuminating and fantastic for the students to really work through, but the businesses got a lot from it as well. So, we do have, we're taking the same approach this year, because from my perspective, it gives a practical outlet and, real world experience for the business students and the businesses. So if anybody's interested in hearing more, I do have a link to an article I wrote on LinkedIn, which has an expression of interest, and you can just say, I'd love to work with them, and I'll follow up with you. So that would be great to spotlight it here. Thanks, Dee.
Not at all, thank you. And hands up, we were one of the entities that worked with you last year. We had two of your wonderful students. I have to say, the amount of knowledge that they actually amassed, but the amount of information that they gave us and the advice that they gave us over the 6 months, I think was absolutely brilliant. So well done, and would definitely recommend it to any companies here that might be interested. So thank you. Susan, are there any other questions there?
Yes, there is. Now, thank you very much. You have to bear with me with this one, because I just have to paraphrase it a little, but the person who asked the question was able to clarify my own kind of questions with this. This is from the point of view of a food production company that's quoted on a stock exchange, that's very nature dependent, certainly very weather dependent for outputs. This question is, can a monetary value be placed on forecasts which predict growing seasons, taking into account the impacts on the growing seasons and consequently the product yields and all of the risks associated with maybe an invasion of insects, and with sales going up and down and expenses up and profit down, etc. So it's really, I think that's the key question there, is, can a monetary value be placed on the forecasts which predict that? And I think it's also the reliability on determination of the monetary value. What source should be used of the weather and nature forecast? I hope I've paraphrased that properly to the person who asked that question.
Well, it makes, what you said makes sense to me. I can, and Catherine might be able to chip in as well here, but yes, in a sense, a monetary value can in theory be placed on anything. Is it useful? And as accountants, we have quite a strict definition of what's useful, such as, is it accurate, etc. Yes, it can, and I've done work doing that. So I'm an environmental economist, and we've done a natural capital accounting work where I've worked with a big food producer to look at cocoa bean production, in the tropics, and we've looked at the sort of weather forecasts and how the rain patterns, etc., are going to change and how that might affect productivity of the crop. And you can then say, oh, there's a reduction in X amount, the market value is this. You can find a monetary value. The question is, how reliable is it? And what kind of decisions is that number therefore appropriate for? Because you might say, well, I've come up with a number that says $1 million. But the methodology and the numbers I've had to use are not that reliable. And therefore, I wouldn't base major business decisions on this, but you have awareness of it. And that's where you get into, is it appropriate to put monetary values on this, or is it better to talk qualitatively or use some quantitative figures to help describe what's happening? And that's a matter for judgment, really. And I think what we need is transparency over the methods used. There is a project, it's a very good question, because there's a project ongoing with the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales with the Met Office to find reliable data to do this kind of work. So there are projects going on. We are at a stage at the moment where we can't say, use this data. Here is the data source. But with tools like Encore and things, we're starting to see, if you say, I've used Encore to model this, people in the nature world will know what that tool is and will know that it's reliable. So it's one of those answers where I can talk around it. I can't say, go to this website, use this data source. But yes, there are ways, and it's about using professional judgment for how reliable that information is, and is it ultimately useful?
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that, Rosie. Catherine, I don't know if you've anything to add to that particular one, but I do have a final question for both of you, if that's okay, unless you wanted to address the forecasting question.
No, just to reiterate and underline Rosie's response. So, accounting is a process, and you uncover different pieces of information as you go along. And it's understanding how relevant that is to your decision making. So in case we step back from putting a financial value on or monetary value on certain aspects due to the unreliability of the data. But similarly, prices, the cost of something or the price can change over time. And, I think it's more how reliable is, this information? How reliable is my current approach to doing things in relation to that element, and how robust is our strategy here? So, it's not a simple linear. So it's back to this linear approach that A plus B is not just equals C. You have to actually sort of, review and go in under the bonnet and explore and all that sort of piece. So I think Rosie's answer was excellent, and I'd caution anybody in just using a figure. They're useful to track change over time, possibly to inform a dashboard, but not to take strategic, life dependent decisions on them.
Okay, good to know. Thank you very much. And actually, we're slightly over time. But if people wanted to hang on, there's just two more questions. Actually, there's the one I'd been suggesting, but I just saw another question come in as well. Do you think there's an opportunity for accountants to pivot to the area of sustainability? Now, we are obviously very familiar with accounting and sustainability, but I suppose for people who are new to it, and maybe actually this feeds into the other question, which is, we had 70% of attendees on this webinar say that they're relatively new to nature as a concept for accounting. And they understand basic terms, but they're not necessarily well versed. So that would be 70% of the attendees here. So tying those things together, what would be the very first thing that people should do if they're coming to this for the first time, accountants or finance professionals or other professionals wanting to get to grips with nature and accounting, nature and business, etc.? And do you both think there is, and actually I can include Dee in this question as well, do you think that there is an opportunity for accountants, even post-omnibus, to pivot to the area of sustainability?
I can talk. I don't want to hog the floor, but yes.
Okay, good. Okay.
Absolutely. As an
Yes,
accountant who has pivoted to sustainability, I did it by going to do a one-year master's degree back in 2012. when I was told there's no connection between accountancy and sustainability. Now we see it, and the accounting institutes are offering training and webinars on sustainability left, right, and centre. There's huge demand. There's also huge demand from businesses for accountants with these skills. And my thing I say again and again and again is, for accountants operating in the sustainability space, there is not a skills gap. There is a knowledge gap. It's the subject matter that we need to upskill ourselves on. But the skills you have around professional skepticism, data management, rigorous reporting, audit trail, all of that, is so needed in the space of sustainability. We have huge risk associated with greenwashing. And I think these skills are really applicable there across a variety of spaces. And I think if you look at organisations like Chartered Accountant Ireland and the resources you are offering, and also I'd say, Accountants for Sustainability, A4S, they're a great organisation with a lot of publications. There is so much out there. I'll let others answer as well, but yeah.
Thank you. And I'll have to draw on Catherine as well, just to give a plug to Business for Biodiversity Ireland, which is another example of that interface between business and nature and biodiversity in particular.
Yeah, I think Rosie highlighted the issue of greenwashing. And so what we need to do, we need that skill set of accountants, the BDI that can sort of interrogate information, provide it in a continued successive iterations to show and tell the story over time. And, that has to underpin any outward facing messages in relation to, your nature strategy, your commitments, your targets, and that influences your brand and your reputation. So we are going through that process with Business for Biodiversity Ireland and the businesses who signed up as part of an accelerator program to build that understanding. And that's also linked in with the Business for Nature global network and other actors in throughout the different regions. So we can't rely on, oh, it'll be grand, or we'll just put a few trees over there and it'll be fine and that'll tick the box. It really requires strong foundations, and strong foundations for perpetuity and for continued existence and thriving in this space as well. So accountants are really important in this space. That would be my view.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Catherine. And I might leave the final word with my own colleague, Dee, for this.
Great. Yes, Susan, thank you very much. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think the skills that accountants have are critical in this. And even with Omnibus, I think, smaller companies are still really interested in getting on that sustainability journey. So yeah, in terms of training, we've had a lot. Rosie's mentioned Accounting for Sustainability, which has a huge amount of resources. We have been running a diploma in sustainability reporting, which is about 60 hours, which really gives you, it goes into the European standards and the CSRD, etc., etc. So for somebody who is looking at it, I think that would be a really good, one to have. So
that's brilliant.
So thank you.
Thank you both. Thank you all very much. I think that's just been fascinating to hear. And from the comments that are coming in the webinar chat as well, I think the audience agrees with that. And it's been brilliant. We will share the slides. I think Rosie and Catherine, we're going to share the slides. And Catherine, I know you've shared a couple of links as well. And there are links within those slides which we can share. And the webinar will be made available as well on the Chartered Accountants website and on LinkedIn. So there's plenty of opportunities for people to listen back to that. But certainly on behalf of Chartered Accountants Ireland, thank you very much. Thank you to our audience, to Chris, our AV manager. And we keep going, for nature and biodiversity.
Yeah,
Thanks,
that's
everybody.
Great.
Thank
Bye
you.
now.
Thank you.